Picture this scenario because I guarantee it's happened to at least 3 people you know personally. Your coworker, let's call him David, just got his annual bonus. $8,000 after taxes. He's been thinking about this money for weeks, planning what to do with it, and then his dad, successful businessman, retired comfortably, gives him some advice. Son, you need to enjoy life while you're young. You work hard. You deserve to treat yourself. Buy something nice. Take that vacation. Money's meant to be spent. So David books a 2-week trip to Europe. $6,000 all in. Posts amazing photos on Instagram. Everyone tells him how smart he is for prioritizing experiences over things. He comes back refreshed, tan, happy. 6 months later, his car transmission fails. $3,500 to fix. He doesn't have it. He puts it on a credit card at 22% interest. And suddenly, that vacation isn't just costing him $6,000. It's costing him $6,000 plus the $3,500 emergency he couldn't cover, plus 22% annual interest on money he's now borrowing, plus the opportunity cost of what that $8,000 bonus could have become if he'd invested it. Over 30 years at 8% returns, that's nearly $80,000 he traded for 2 weeks of gelato and selfies in front of old buildings. My name is Mr. Bamboo, and I spend way too much time thinking about the financial advice that gets repeated so often it sounds like wisdom, but is actually destroying people's futures one well-intentioned cliché at a time. If you're someone who's followed conventional financial wisdom and somehow ended up further behind, or if you've ever felt guilty for not living your best life while you're young, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if this helps you out. Because today, we're going to dissect the financial advice that sounds intelligent, gets nodded at during dinner parties, and is mathematically ruining millions of people who trust it. Here's the thing about bad financial advice. It doesn't sound bad. It sounds reasonable. It sounds balanced. It sounds like the kind of thing a wise person would say. That's what makes it so dangerous. Nobody takes advice that obviously sounds stupid. Hey, you should spend all your money on lottery tickets and pyramid schemes. You'd laugh at that person. But when someone says, you can't take it with you when you die, or you need to live a little, your brain files that under reasonable middle ground wisdom. It's not. It's a trap dressed up in folksy common sense. And the people giving you this advice often mean well. They're not trying to sabotage you. They just don't understand the math of compound interest, the reality of modern economic fragility, or the difference between financial advice that worked in 1985 and financial advice that works now. Let's start with the big one, the advice that has probably destroyed more wealth than any stock market crash in history. You're only young once. Enjoy your money now while you can. This sounds compassionate. It sounds like someone who cares about your happiness and doesn't want you to sacrifice your youth for some theoretical future. But let's do the forensic accounting on what this advice actually costs. You're 25 years old. You make $50,000 a year. Someone tells you not to be so focused on saving, live a little. So instead of investing $500 a month, you invest $200 and spend the extra $300 on experiences, nice dinners, concerts, weekend trips. That's just $3,600 a year. Surely that won't make a huge difference, right? Let's fast forward 40 years to age 65. At an 8% average annual return, the person who invested $500 per month has $1.55 million. The person who invested $200 per month has $620,000. The difference is $930,000. That's not a typo. The advice to enjoy your money while you're young cost you nearly $1 million. And here's the part that really gets me. That person at 65 with $620,000 is going to have to be very careful about money in retirement. They're looking at maybe $2,000 a month in safe withdrawals. They're going to have to budget, watch their spending, maybe skip some vacations. The person with $1.55 million can generate over $5,000 a month and still have their principal grow. They have actual freedom. They can be generous with their kids and grandkids. They can handle medical expenses without panic. They can live without financial anxiety for the rest of their lives. So here's the question nobody asks when they give this advice. Which version of you deserves to enjoy life more? Your 25-year-old self or your 65-year-old self? Because mathematically, you can't have both. The money you spend today is money your future self won't have, magnified by decades of compound interest. And here's what really bothers me about this advice. The implicit assumption is that spending money equals enjoying life, that the only way to be happy when you're young is to consume. But some of the happiest periods of my life cost almost nothing. Hiking with friends, cooking elaborate meals at home, reading in the park, learning a new skill from YouTube. The correlation between spending and happiness is far weaker than the financial industrial complex wants you to believe. You can enjoy being young without spending yourself into permanent financial fragility. But nobody's making money off you doing free things, so nobody's loudly advocating for that path. Now, let's talk about the second piece of advice that sounds smart but is functionally a wealth destruction device. Don't try to time the market. Just invest consistently no matter what. And look, I need to be careful here because there's a kernel of truth in this advice. For most people, trying to actively trade in and out of the market is a disaster. They buy high when everyone's excited and sell low when everyone's panicking. Dollar cost averaging, investing a fixed amount regularly regardless of market conditions, is generally a good strategy. But here's where this advice becomes dangerous. It gets applied to situations where timing actually matters enormously. It gets weaponized to prevent people from making obvious, intelligent decisions. Let me give you a real example. It's March 2020. COVID just shut down the world. The stock market has dropped 34% in 4 weeks. You have $20,000 in cash that you are going to invest gradually over the year. Financial advisors everywhere are saying, don't try to time the market. Stick to your plan. Keep dollar cost averaging. And that sounds so reasonable, so disciplined. Except anyone with a functioning brain could see that stocks just went on sale. Everything from Apple to Coca-Cola was 30% cheaper than it was a month ago, and the underlying businesses hadn't fundamentally changed. If you had invested that $20,000 in March 2020, instead of spreading it out over 12 months, you'd have made an extra $15,000 to $20,000 by the end of 2021 as the market recovered. But you didn't because you followed the advice not to time the market. Here's the nuance that gets lost. There's a difference between trying to predict short-term market movements and recognizing obvious opportunities. Nobody knows if the market will be up or down next Tuesday. But when the market drops 30% in a month during a temporary crisis, and you have cash sitting around earning nothing, that's not timing the market. That's basic math. You're buying the same assets at a lower price. The advice should be, don't try to predict normal market fluctuations, but absolutely take advantage of obvious dislocations. But that's not what people say. They say the simplified version that prevents you from making intelligent decisions during the moments when intelligent decisions matter most. And this same pattern repeats with real estate. Don't try to time the housing market. Just buy when you're ready. Except interest rates matter. A lot. If you bought a house at 3% interest versus 7% interest on a $400,000 mortgage, the difference in your monthly payment is nearly $1,000. Over 30 years, that's $360,000 in additional interest. But if you suggested waiting for rates to drop, someone would call you a market timer and tell you that time in the market beats timing the market, which is true for stocks you're holding for decades. It's catastrophically wrong for debt you're taking on at specific interest rates. Let's hit the third piece of advice. And this one makes me genuinely angry because it targets people who are trying to do the right thing. Make sure you're contributing enough to your 401k to get the full employer match. That's free money. This advice is true as far as it goes. If your employer matches 50% of your contributions up to 6% of your salary, and you're not contributing at least 6%, you're leaving money on the table. But here's what this advice ignores completely. For a huge percentage of Americans, they have high-interest debt, credit cards at 20% or more, car loans at 12%, personal loans at 15%. And they're being told to prioritize retirement contributions over paying off that debt because of the employer match. Let's do the math. You make $60,000 a year. You have $10,000 in credit card debt at 20% interest. You contribute 4% to your 401k, which is $3,600 per year, and your employer matches 50%, adding another $100 to $800. Total annual contribution, $5,400. Sounds great, right? Except that $10,000 in credit card debt is costing you $2,000 per year in interest. And if you're only making minimum payments, you're barely touching the principal. That debt could take you 15 years to pay off at minimum payments, costing you over $15,000 in interest. Now imagine you stopped contributing to your 401k temporarily. You lose the $1,800 employer match for 1 year. But you take that $3,600 and put it toward your credit card debt, plus whatever else you can scrape together. You pay off the debt in 18 months instead of 15 years. You just saved yourself over $13,000 in interest payments. The foregone employer match cost you $2,700 over those 18 months. You're still $10,000 ahead. But nobody tells you this because the retirement industrial complex has successfully convinced everyone that you must always be contributing to retirement no matter what, even if you're simultaneously paying predatory interest rates on consumer debt. The correct advice is, get the employer match if you have no high-interest debt. If you do have high-interest debt, pause retirement contributions and obliterate that debt first. Then come back and max out your retirement accounts with the money you're no longer spending on interest. But that's not catchy. That doesn't fit on a motivational poster. So people follow the simple advice and stay trapped. Here's number 4. And this one gets repeated in every personal finance book written before 2015. Buy a home as soon as you can. Renting is throwing money away. This advice made sense in a different era. When mortgage rates were reasonable, when housing prices grew steadily but not insanely, when people stayed in one place for decades, buying a home was often a good forced savings mechanism. But the housing market has fundamentally changed, and the advice hasn't kept up. Let's look at the actual math of buying versus renting right now. You buy a $400,000 home with 10% down, so you need $40,000 for the down payment plus closing costs. Your mortgage at 7% interest is about $2,400 per month. Property tax and insurance, another $600. Maintenance averaged 1% of home value annually. That's $330 per month. Total monthly cost, $3,230. Now let's say you rent an equivalent place for $2,200 per month. Everyone tells you you're throwing away $2,200 a month. But are you? You're saving $1,030 per month compared to owning. Plus, you didn't lock up $40,000 in a down payment. If you invested that $40,000, plus the $1,030 monthly difference at 8% returns, after 10 years, you'd have over $270,000 in investments. The homeowner, assuming 3% annual appreciation, would have a house worth $537,000, with about $345,000 in equity after paying down some principal. Sounds like the homeowner won, right? But we haven't factored in transaction costs. If you sell that house, you're paying 6% to real estate agents. That's $32,000. Suddenly, your equity is $313,000. The renter has $270,000 in liquid investments that can be accessed anytime without selling anything. The homeowner is ahead by $43,000 over 10 years. That's a 10% total return on the decision to buy, or about 1% per year. Hardly the wealth-building machine everyone claims. And that's assuming everything goes perfectly. No major repairs. No job loss forcing a sale at the wrong time. No housing market downturn. The real kicker is opportunity cost. That homeowner is locked into their location. If an amazing job opportunity comes up across the country, they can't easily take it. If their industry collapses in their city, they can't move without taking a financial hit. The renter has mobility, liquidity, and flexibility. In a modern economy where the average person changes jobs every 4 years, that flexibility has enormous value that doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. The correct advice is, buy a home if you plan to stay in one place for at least 7 to 10 years, if you have stable income, if you're buying in a market where the cost of buying isn't dramatically higher than renting, and if you emotionally value homeownership beyond the financial calculation. Otherwise, renting is not throwing money away, it's buying flexibility and potentially coming out ahead financially. Now let's talk about the advice that sounds impossibly virtuous and responsible. Pay off your mortgage early. Being debt-free is freedom. And look, I understand the emotional appeal. The idea of owning your home outright, of never having a mortgage payment again, is psychologically powerful. But this advice ignores opportunity cost so completely that it borders on financial malpractice. Let's say you have a $300,000 for mortgage at 3.5% interest. You have an extra $1,000 per month, and you're deciding between paying down the mortgage or investing. If you put that $1,000 toward extra mortgage payments, you'll pay off your 30-year mortgage in about 16 years instead of 30. You'll save around $80,000 in interest. Not bad, but if you invested that same $1,000 per month at 8% average returns, after 16 years, your mortgage balance after 16 years of regular payments would be around $60,000. So you could pay off the entire mortgage and still have $210,000 left over. You're $130,000 better off by investing instead of prepaying. But the advice to pay off your mortgage early persists because it feels safe. It feels responsible. It sounds like something Dave Ramsey would approve of. And for people who are psychologically unable to invest consistently, maybe paying off the mortgage is the right move. But that's an emotional decision, not a financial one. And nobody admits that. The problem with all of this advice, every single example I've given, is that it's optimized for sounding good, not for being correct. It's optimized for being easily repeatable, for fitting into a tweet or a fortune cookie, for making the advice giver sound wise and balanced. Financial advice has become performance art. People say things that signal thoughtfulness and virtue, rather than things that are mathematically optimal. And the tragedy is that millions of people follow this advice in good faith. They think they're being smart. They think they're being responsible. They're actually being systematically impoverished by well-meaning platitudes that don't hold up to basic arithmetic. So what's the alternative? How do you navigate financial decisions when conventional wisdom is actively misleading? You have to become comfortable with nuance. You have to accept that the right answer depends on your specific situation. You have to run the actual numbers instead of trusting folk wisdom. When someone gives you financial advice, ask yourself, what are the assumptions baked into this? What would have to be true for this to be good advice? Is that true for me? When someone tells you to enjoy your money while you're young, ask, am I enjoying consumption or am I enjoying life? Would my 65-year-old self thank me for this decision? When someone tells you not to time the market, ask, is this normal volatility or an obvious dislocation? When someone tells you to prioritize retirement contributions, ask, what's my highest interest rate debt and what's my expected investment return? When someone tells you to buy a house, ask, what's my expected duration in this location and what's the real cost comparison? When someone tells you to pay off your mortgage early, ask, what's my interest rate and what's my alternative return? The goal isn't to become a contrarian who rejects all conventional wisdom. The goal is to become someone who thinks clearly about trade-offs and understands that financial decisions are mathematical problems, not moral statements. There's no virtue in paying off low-interest debt early. There's no sin in renting. There's no badge of honor for spending money to prove you're living life. And there's no wisdom in following advice just because it sounds balanced and reasonable. You are not trying to impress people with your financial decisions. You're trying to optimize your actual life outcomes. Those are often completely different goals. The person who retires at 55 because they ignored conventional wisdom and invested aggressively didn't miss out on youth. They bought themselves 10 extra years of freedom. The person who stayed in a rental and invested the difference didn't throw money away. They maintained optionality and potentially came out ahead. The person who aggressively paid off high-interest debt instead of contributing to their 401k wasn't being irresponsible. They were being numerate. Here's what I want you to walk away with. The next time someone gives you financial advice that sounds smart, that gets heads nodding around the table, that feels like the responsible middle path, stop and run the actual math. Because there's a decent chance that advice is optimized for sounding good, not for being correct. And the difference between those two things is your financial future. If this video made you question advice you've been following, smash that like button and subscribe for more content that challenges conventional financial wisdom. I'll see you in the next one.